Enough is enough. What we've seen over the past 2 weeks is what you might call a preponderance of evidence in the impeachment case against President Trump. The public hearing phase of impeachment is now concluded. 12 witnesses offered hours of testimony, each corroborating a pretty simple, straightforward assertion that the president mounted a coordinated effort to pressure Ukraine into publicly announcing an investigation of his domestic political rival in exchange for a White House meeting and badly needed military aid. Fun fact, a preponderance of evidence is a real legal term, meaning there is greater than a 50% chance that based on all the evidence shown, the plaintiff's claims are true and the defendant did in fact do the thing he is accused of. It's used in a civil case, and by any reasonable person's standards, the evidence relayed by the 12 witnesses would easily meet the 50% threshold. But this, as you know, is not a legal process. It's a purely political one. And so, no matter the preponderance of evidence, Republicans in the House and the Senate, as well as voters at home, will have to decide if Trump is guilty of anything. To be clear, there is more evidence we did not hear. There are still plenty of Democrats who want to hear from Twitter tease John Bolton, Mick Mulvaney, Mike Pompeo. But there is enough already to know exactly what the president did and what he wanted. There was Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman and Jennifer Williams, an aide to Vice President Mike Pence, both of whom were on the July 25th phone call between Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky. Not hearsay, they were on the call. There was Kurt Volker and Tim Morrison, two witnesses called by Republicans, the former who said investigating Burisma meant investigating Biden, and the latter who said aid was conditioned on a public statement from Zelensky announcing the Burisma investigation. And of course, there was Gordon Sondland, the Trump donor turned ambassador who appeared for the third time to say definitively what he knew, what everybody knew, as directed by the president himself.
Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes.
And to put a bow on it all, the White House's former top Russia advisor, Dr. Fiona Hill, testified that she told Sondland this whole domestic errand would blow up.
He was being involved in a domestic political errand, and we were being involved in national security foreign policy, and those two things had just diverged. I did say to him, Ambassador Sondland, Gordon, I think this is all going to blow up, and here we are.
She also offered this incredible warning to anyone, including the president, who is insisting Russia did not interfere in our elections.
Right now, Russia's security services and their proxies have geared up to repeat their interference in the 2020 election. We are running out of time to stop them. In the course of this investigation, I would ask that you please not promote politically driven falsehoods that so clearly advance Russian interests.
To this preponderance of evidence, Republicans had multiple objections, most of them desperate, none of them particularly compelling. I can boil it down to this.
We need to subpoena Hunter Biden and the whistleblower for closed-door depositions, as well as relevant documents from the DNC. An Inquisition victim had more rights than the Democrats are giving the president.
But there's at least one thing both sides seem to agree on. It's enough already.
Even with our hands tied behind our backs, we've been able to present to the American people a compelling argument for moving forward with a review of whether or not we should have articles of impeachment brought to the floor of the House.
I think we've had enough. I think it's time to shut it down.
So here's the deal. This is it, folks. Democrats and their multiple witnesses, even the two Republican witnesses, corroborated the basic facts day in and day out. Those facts used to be in dispute before the whistleblowers and the transcripts and the witnesses. Republicans disputed the facts. Then the facts came out. All Republicans could do was discredit the witnesses, distract, deflect. But the facts are now undisputed. What's left is whether what Trump did is impeachable, and that is in dispute. No House Republicans that we know of have indicated that they will vote to impeach. In fact, here was one Will Hurd, a frequent Trump critic.
An impeachable offense should be compelling, overwhelmingly clear, and unambiguous, and it's not something to be rushed or taken lightly. I've not heard evidence proving the president committed bribery or extortion. I also reject the notion that holding this view means supporting all the foreign policy choices we have been hearing about over these last few weeks.
It's also unclear whether, if Trump is impeached, any Republicans in the Senate will break ranks and vote to remove the president. And finally, the American people. You guys, you are divided too. 50% of independents questioned in an NPR PBS Marist poll conducted this month did not support impeaching and removing Trump, with just 42% supporting it. Now, I've said all along, whether you ultimately decide Trump should be impeached or not is a fair question. But the time to stop arguing the facts, what he did, why he did it, that's over. We know. It's clear. He pushed a foreign government to investigate his political rival for his own personal gain, and he used the office of the president and U.S. foreign policy to get what he wanted. Now, if you think that's okay, that's something that the next president and the next president and the next president should do with impunity. Well, that's your prerogative. Joining me now is a pair of CNN political commentators, host of The Van Jones Show, Van Jones, and former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent. Van, look, to me, this meets any threshold for impeachment, but I want you to respond to what Republican Congressman Will Hurd said, that ultimately, in his mind, it didn't.
Well, listen, I think it's a fair, I think people are saying, well, he's just a sellout. I think if you're a Republican in this situation, you aren't just dealing with Trump above you, you're dealing with the base around you. And it's very, very difficult. He's the only African-American Republican that we have in the Congress. He's the only one that's been able to be as critical as he has been. If he's afraid to jump off of that diving board, I don't think people should attack him. I think we've got a much bigger problem, which is that the polarization in this country is such that no matter what anybody says about the other side, people are going to be dug into their tribal camps. I think there's plenty of evidence at this point that the president behaved in ways that are wrong. And also the brave Ukrainians who really, that's the center of this thing. You've got Ukrainian freedom fighters who are up against the biggest threat in the world, who were relying on Americans for help. Their plight got turned into a political football. Yeah. That is a tragedy. And the fact that we can't even agree on that is, I think, a very, very bad sign.
Charlie, there's so much evidence of what the president did and why he did it. Do you think House Republicans would ever vote to impeach the president, no matter how convincing the case against him was?
SE, at this moment, I'd have to say no, unless support from the Republican base diminishes for the president. I suspect most will stick with the president, at least on this issue of impeachment or indictment. I mean, what's really sad about this is I think everybody now agrees on the facts. Yes, there was a quid pro quo. Right. Yes, the president did abuse his office, and he has there is genuine misconduct in office here. So they're not disputing the facts, and the only issue they can debate now is whether this bad conduct rises to the level of impeachment. And I mean, that's a fair debate to have. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, I thought I understood the rules, that, you can't use your official resources to investigate your opponent, especially colluding with a foreign head of state. You can't use federal resources or federal dollars, to coerce somebody to basically do what you want them to do. I thought I understood the rules and the standards, and I always thought the Department of Justice would be jumping up and down over something like this. But
so, Charlie, do you think
maybe
that you
the
would
rules are changing right before us?
Would you have voted to impeach the president had you been in the House still?
I certainly would have voted for the inquiry. And at this moment, I do think that this rises to the level of impeachment. And then I think they should send this over, and then let's have a trial just to see what else I'd like to hear what the president's defense is.
So, Van, as you know, I'm not a Democrat. I disagree with Democrats on a great many issues, but I was incredibly impressed, maybe even a little jealous of how well Democrats organized and conducted these hearings. This was not a circus. It wasn't weeks of grandstanding. The witnesses were incredibly impressive. The testimony was substantive. But all that said, I'm not sure to what end. I mean, according to most polls at this point, minds haven't really changed. Is this just going to end up being, to your point, a partisan exercise in futility?
Almost certainly so. I mean, part of the things, you talk to regular people, They see all these people on the screen who they've never heard of saying things that they don't know much about. That's a regular person. And so, from a legal point of view, from a political point of view, those of us who are kind of news junkies and who are political professionals, we can appreciate the fact that this was a disciplined hearing. There weren't a lot of, I am Spartacus moments. There was like an actual, but for, I think, regular people, this is a little bit above folks' heads, and people kind of just go to their own respective camps. I have to say, as proud as I am, the Democrats have been a little bit more disciplined through this process. We do pay a price for the fact that before the guy was even inaugurated, people were screaming for him to be impeached.
Yes.
And so when you have, part of our party screaming impeachment literally
well, and it doesn't help
even
either.
president.
I mean, I've heard a number of congressional members say, look, nobody comes to Congress to impeach a president. I can think of several who actually ran on it. So I hear you. There's a trust deficit with that.